Now, on this, there was a meeting on Friday, with members of the press and also members of the UFO office, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, and basically one of the reporters, the same reporter that was at for the New York Times, Julian Barnes. Now, Barnes, as you remember, this guy was the same one who wrote that article. I believe it was October 28th. He wrote an article where he had contact with his sources were two anonymous Pentagon people who told him that this upcoming report, which by the way was due on October 31st, and we still haven't received. As of the 19th of December, the public has not seen this report yet. But anyway, before that report was supposed to come out, this New York Times article came out, and this Julian Barnes, this New York Times journalist, who apparently doesn't believe in the extraterrestrial presence here on Earth, has done zero research on it, in his reporting career, has no idea what he's talking about, completely unfit to be writing articles for the New York Times on UFOs, because this guy's an idiot when it comes to the subject. But yet he wrote this article, and he had two anonymous sources from the Pentagon that basically told him that this report, half the stuff there's 366 objects that they looked at, right, in this upcoming report, and more than half of them was just clutter, clutter and junk, like balloons floating around, and some of it was Chinese spy drones, but they didn't have any answers for the other half of the other stuff yet. But if they did, they would be able to show. They just didn't have enough information, enough data. But if they did have more data, they would most certainly be able to show that it wasn't extraterrestrial in origin. That's what Julian Barnes wrote. Right. So here he was part of this roundtable discussion again. I guess the New York Times, the editors of the New York Times were so thrilled about how great of a job he did with that other story, which was basically just nothing more than a press release for the Pentagon. Well, so they sent him out again. That's how smart the editors are at the New York Times, to send out Julian Barnes again to write something like this. And according to this article that was in the Unidentified, that talked about what happened on Friday, this guy mentions Julian Barnes. It says, the mainstream media that were invited to the roundtable to ask questions made some very good inquiries and observations, with the exception of New York Times journalist Julian Barnes, who was seemingly trying to stigmatize UAP by using the infamously derogatory space aliens terminology rather than the accepted non-human intelligence. So Julian Barnes shows up, and again, this guy from the New York Times has no idea whatsoever what he's talking about when it comes to UFOs. Shouldn't even be. I mean, if you have no like I don't understand how you could send someone like this to an event like this, like somebody who has no knowledge of UFOs or the different whistleblowers from the military who have stepped forward throughout the years and who calls it space aliens, tries to stigmatize the thing. Oh, it's a space aliens. It's only space. They're saying it's space aliens. That's so ridiculous, preposterous. There's no such thing. I mean, that's the mentality of somebody like this who doesn't believe in it at all, right? I mean, at least send somebody who's going to be, in the middle here on the whole thing. I mean, it would probably be a mistake to send with someone like me. If I was a reporter at the New York Times, it would probably be, admittedly, it would be a mistake to send someone like me to this, because I'm going to be totally biased, right, against them, because I know something's going on, so I know that I would probably be standing out there saying to Moultrie's face, you know what, Moultrie, I don't believe one word you just told me. I think you're lying. You're covering this damn thing up. Tell us the truth already. That's what I would be. That's how I would be acting, right? So it would be inappropriate. It wouldn't be a good thing to send someone like me there. They'd probably throw me out, right? But Barnes, he's on the flip side of this. This guy doesn't believe in this stuff at all. But yet the New York Times sends this clown to cover something like this. And basically, he doesn't believe in this. So what's the I know, again, people who don't have any background information on this stuff, they don't do any research whatsoever. They didn't study the history of it, and yet these reporters like this guy for the New York Times, right? The New York Times. How could you send a clown like this to a report? How could you have a clown like this reporting on a subject like this? This guy Julian Barnes. Come on, what are you doing? This guy thinks it's a joke. Doesn't believe in extraterrestrials whatsoever. Basically stigmatizes it in his articles. Tries to anyhow. And you're sending this guy to something like this, basically who's going to write a piece of crap story that turns out to be nothing but a mere press release. I'm Julian Barnes, and I don't believe in this nonsense about UFOs and space aliens. You gotta be kidding me. It's absolutely preposterous and absurd. Imagine somebody believing in something like that. I mean, where do these people come from, these idiots? I mean, I don't even need to research this kind of stuff because there's no such thing as aliens from outer space, space aliens. It's absolutely ridiculous. I didn't even have to ask any questions barely. These gentlemen from the Pentagon provided everything we needed to know. There was no investigation needed whatsoever. I just basically had to write a press release. So it's all I have to do. It's just, why do we even cover these kind of nonsensical stories? We shouldn't even be publishing them in the New York Times. But Mama, it was very easy to write. So why don't we go out and celebrate tonight? We'll get some champagne and pompano, and maybe we'll have a dessert of some Royal Beluga caviar. That's the kind of clowns that they're sending from the New York Times to cover UFOs. A very serious subject, the biggest story of all time, but yet we're sending Julian Barnes. I mean, my God, UFOs from outer space, how absurd! That's what they're sending. They're sending their worst. They're sending a dumbbell, basically, to write about this, to report on this. What kind of reporter is that? Doesn't have any knowledge of anything that's happened in the past, just basically... When he was probably told the first time to write about this, earlier this year, right? He probably, what are you talking about? Sending me to cover UFOs? How ridiculous! Well, it'll be real easy, Julian. You just have to, whatever they tell you, just write what they tell you. You don't even have to ask any questions. Oh, okay, I guess that'll be okay then, as long as there's no investigation needed. See, that's how all these reporters are from these big newspapers. A lot of them, when it comes to UFOs, there's no Woodward and Bernstein. This is a cosmic Watergate, like Stanton Friedman used to say. It needs to be investigated that way, but nobody's doing it. Why not? It should. I mean, if I was a owner of one of these big newspapers, I would have a crew put together to get to the bottom of this, to find out the truth, to actually expose this whole nonsense already. But it makes you wonder, again, I've talked about this before in the past, you have to wonder how many of these big newspapers are basically part of the cover-up. It's very possible that some of these people, like the owners of these companies, they might have been taught, people might have met with them from the Pentagon and said, look, you got to keep this out of the paper. We can't let the public know the truth because they're a bunch of dummies and they're not smart like we are. They can't handle the truth like we could because our brains are just in a different kind of mold than the regular public, than the regular Joe out there. So we can't let them know. So just do us a favor. We'll help you out with different stories as time goes on. Is that what's going on? I mean, possibly something's going on. Either that or the publishers themselves are a bunch of idiots too, and they've bought into the stigmatization over the years, and they don't realize that this is that there is a cover-up. I don't know how they can't, though. I don't. Again, anybody that would take the time to actually do some serious research on this, I mean, even if you didn't have your own experiences, if you were to read the different historical books that have been put together on this stuff, like I talk about all the time, UFOs on the National Security State, volumes 1 and 2 by Richard Dolan, start there. If you're a reporter, those were the books to get, right? And then you could take it from there and try to figure things out. But stop sending these Julian Barnes from the New York Times is here to cover UFOs. He thinks it's absurd. Stop sending goofballs like this. This guy has no business writing about UFOs. He's a clown. He's an absolute clown. I mean, these people, people might get upset with me the way I talk about these people, but look at the way they've been talking about people like me over the years, right? The way they treat people who believe in UFOs and the extraterrestrial presence, the way they act about that. It's time to give it right back in their faces because they in the final analysis, right? They're the idiots. They're the ones who are going to look like goddamn fools when this whole thing is all said and done, right? They're going to be the idiots. They're going to be the people who will be forgotten when this whole thing is over, right? When you get to the when the truth finally drops, when the shoe finally drops, right, and the truth comes out, and everyone starts will look at this and they'll say, "Oh my God, the reporter." Think about all the reporters that have just been. Have not looked into that had the opportunity to try to break this biggest story of all time throughout the decades, and they've been unable to do it. People working at big newspapers that have the resources to try to get to the bottom of stuff. People at the Washington Post, the New York Times, all these big newspapers, right? All these big news channels, ABC, CBS, Fox, none of them are doing anything. They don't, when it comes to this, they basically treat it like a joke for the most part. Or, it's something that filled in the last 15 minutes of their news hour. It's never something that it's up front like it should be. This is something that should be front and center and talked about all the time. Hey, Roger Moultrie stepped up to a podium on Friday or met with in this roundtable discussion on Friday with reporters and basically lied. That's what he did. If I would have been there, I would have said, look, I've read these books. I've read different reports from over the years. I've seen testimony, signed affidavits from people who were in the military that say that there's most certainly extraterrestrials recovered and craft recovered over the decades. So I think you're a liar. I don't think you're telling us the truth. That's how you need to talk to these people in the Pentagon. Right? You need to really smash it with some hard questions like that. Not this. You think it might be extraterrestrials? I hate to bring that up, but could it possibly be aliens? Not this timid, because they're afraid to ask these questions because they think it sounds ridiculous. There's nothing ridiculous about it. Hey, look at Moultrie. There's something going on here. In fact, I saw one of these beings, right? And I saw one of the crafts, so I know personally something's going on here. But look at all this other evidence. There's affidavits here, right? There's all kinds of tens of thousands of testimony from different witnesses over the years. There's physical trace evidence, right? There's all this stuff, right? There's the cattle mutilations. I think you're a liar, right? You're a damn liar. Tell us the truth already. You need to be hard with these guys. You need to be hard with these guys. Stop letting them step all over you. That's what these media outlets are doing. They're letting the Pentagon step all over them. Like you're a bunch of ants. You're a bunch of ants. Stop acting like, you're supposed to be doing a job for the public to try to get to the bottom of this thing. Instead of you're all timid. Well, we don't want to ask them really hard questions. That's what you need to do. That's exactly what you need to do. For all these decades now, the media has basically been treating the military, the Pentagon, right? Like they're afraid of them. Oh, we don't want to ask them hard questions. Oh my God, no. Oh my God, no. We'll just write basically a press release for them, and they're just real boring. But basically there are always these boring stories, right? Boring press release style stories, because that's basically what they're doing. They're basically just serving as press relations for the Pentagon. Instead, they're not asking the hard questions. If I was a reporter at that meeting, I would have been, Moultrie, I think you're a liar. You have to be. Based on all this other evidence that I've read through, you're a liar. If you don't know, if you're telling me you don't know this, right, that there's extraterrestrials responsible for some of these craft, then that means you're a damn liar. And again, the New York Times, I say to someone like the New York Times, why are you sending a clown like Julian Barnes to cover something like this when the guy doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to UFOs? Seriously.